Dredef, Healthcare Stories. Carol Gill and Larry Voss are being interviewed in the living room of their home in Darien, Illinois. Their interviews are presented in 6 parts. This interview is part 4.
I think a lot of people with disabilities talk about being afraid to go to the hospital. And I think always that fear it's not groundless anxiety, it's based on real experiences. I am terrified to go into the hospital again, especially if I don't have an advocate. I mean, if Larry, my husband, who knows me real well, can be there and advocate for me, I feel better about that. But I'm at a point in my life where a lot of my friends have died. I have, no parents. I don't have other family members who can advocate. So my vision of future hospitalizations is the nightmare of being alone and having all these things happen and no one being able to communicate or listen to me and not having anyone else there to fight. And one of the experiences I had that was really, I think, nightmarish, and especially other ventilator users, I think, would relate to this, is I had to have an emergency surgery to remove my gallbladder. So I did not elect to go into the hospital. I was forced to go into the hospital. And I had the surgery. It actually turned out very well, because even though I had a bad gallbladder for like a year before it decided to blow up, there were signs that it was going down. And I had so many doctors tell me that if I have to have gallbladder removal, it would have to be a full-blown open abdominal surgery. Because of my scoliosis, they would not be able to use, what do they call the techniques? Laparoscopic or micro techniques, or less invasive surgery, the kind that is usually used with gallbladder surgery. But when I had this crisis, I was in the ER, and the surgeon who happened to be on call didn't read the book about what he wasn't supposed to do. Instead of that, he just saw me as a person, and he knew I had scoliosis, and his attitude was, but why don't I just do what I normally do unless I see a problem? And that's what he did. So he did the least invasive technique, 3 little openings. He got my gallbladder out, and so I was in good shape within 24 hours, ready to go home, which of course I was communicating that I really wanted to do. Yet they left me intubated longer after surgery because the anesthesiologist was concerned about my respiratory status. So when he came to extubate me, I was totally awake, very uncomfortable with the tube, and chomping at the bit to get it out. And my own pulmonary doctor supposedly had briefed him about how to get me from the extubated state to either sitting up without ventilation, because as I'm sitting here I don't need a ventilator, but if I'm lying down I do. I mean, that's the nature of my condition. I can't breathe against gravity. So she supposedly explained this to him, and I had my non-invasive ventilator nearby with my nasal mask, so that if I had to lie in bed, I could just put the nasal mask on and breathe comfortably. But he didn't either get the memo or he filtered it through his own better ideas, and he told me I would have to prove that I could breathe on my own before he would extubate me. So here you have the medical specialist again, who is going to threaten me and make me jump through hoops to prove that I'm worthy of functioning the way I normally function. So I remember I couldn't talk. I was intubated. I had no family or advocates around me. And I remember opening my eyes like, no, why? He said, I'm going to turn our ventilator off. I'm going to leave you intubated, and I'm going to see if you can breathe on your own. Now, when I'm in bed, I never breathe on my own. I always use a non-invasive ventilator like many people with polio do. I cannot breathe against gravity. But he was saying, unless you do this, I'm not going to extubate you. So he turned off the machine, even though I was like trying to communicate with him. And I had to consciously, like weightlifting, breathe against gravity. And I did it for like a minute or two. And he said, good, you can do it. So I'm thinking, okay, my problems are over. He said, now do it for 20 minutes more. I'll be back in 20 minutes. He leaves me alone and goes. So for 20 minutes, I carefully, thinking with each breath, like weightlifting, took another breath and took another breath. He came back 45 minutes later and finally said, oh, cool, you're doing great. Took the tube out and let me sit up and let me have my ventilator if I wanted to lie down. So what he did, in his concern for my respiratory status, was tax my respiratory status to its limits, beyond its limits. And only my crip determination kept my cool. If I had panicked, I could very well have died when he left the room. And that's a pretty close call. That's why I don't want to go to a hospital. Larry and I know someone who, in the last 2 years, aspirated and suffocated in a hospital because the health professionals left the room and they ignored the call light.
And didn't answer the call light.
And I don't know if the family is pressing if there's going to be litigation or not, but this is not hearsay or rumor. This is documented fact that this person is not with us today because of that. And I was just a little luckier. I got through it.
Healthcare Stories, made possible with generous support from the Manuel D. and Rhoda Mayerson Foundation. Carol Gill and Larry Voss were interviewed at their home in Darien, Illinois, July 2011. For more information, visit the Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund website, dredf.org/healthcare-stories. This work is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike 3.0 Unported license.